Welcome back. This year, New York Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Nidia Velázquez, joined by New Jersey's Bob Menendez in the Senate, introduced the Puerto Rico Self-Determination Act of 2021. If passed, the legislation would create a process for Puerto Ricans to finally determine the nature of their relationship with the United States. Here to discuss this and more is Walter Gualterio Alomar, President of Organization for Culture of Hispanic Origins, or OCHO. Welcome, Walter. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Claro, pleasure having you as well. So please, to start, can you tell us about your organization, OCHO, and your purpose and mission?
Well, my organization, we started several years ago, and we are a nonprofit organization that provides cultural, educational, and mental health services to the community. Now, most of the community that we service is basically the Latino community, and we do a lot of work around Puerto Rico and what is currently happening. And we try to educate the community as well as with workshops, cultural workshops, educational workshops. And we just try to keep the community involved in what is currently happening here and abroad.
Gracias. Thank you for that. And, speaking of Puerto Rico, what is the current political status of the island right now?
The actual political status of the island, it is technically a colony. It is like it's like to be, they describe it as a commonwealth, but it's actually a colony of the United States, meaning that it is property of the United States. And because of this colonial status, the United States has the ability to determine our future for us. We are not in charge of what is currently happening on the island. The actual government that is in Puerto Rico is just actually a dummy government that is there to manage the day-to-day operations. But at the end of the day, the United States dictates policy, economy, everything from when the hurricane hit the island right up to the economy and the fiscal control board. So we're basically under ownership of the United States.
Got it. Thank you for breaking that down, Walter. I know that there's a lot of disconnect with the diaspora and, the island folks. So I know some of your work involves educating people on what really goes on. And, the fact that Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens is something that's not widely known for some reason. And something else I think is a fact, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that Puerto Ricans cannot vote for a president in the island?
That is correct. That is correct. We do not have the ability to vote for the presidency. But yet at the same time, they are dictating policy in Puerto Rico. And also, there's also this misconception about us not paying taxes. We do pay taxes. We do contribute. We pay aside from federal taxes, we pay everything else, sales tax, every other tax, unemployment insurance, and so on, Social Security, all of that, we do contribute to the U.S. economy. But unfortunately, that is a big misconception that is put out there. And people always have this tendency to believe like we're basically like a welfare state. We're just looking for handouts. We want to just take from the U.S. while not getting anything, while not giving back anything in return, which is a total misconception. And that's why you have like a lot of the current issues that's currently going on.
Got it. So there is a division between the 3.2 million U.S. citizens in Puerto Rico who call for statehood versus those who call for independence. Can you help us break down what the difference is between the two and which one you advocate for and why?
Well, the island as a whole the 3.2 people in Puerto Rico are not actually crying out for statehood, but there is a majority portion of the population does want statehood. And the independence issue has been growing in Puerto Rico because people are realizing that under the U.S. rule, the island has been suffering. If we want anything from the United States, we basically have to ask permission for it. I believe in freedom. I believe in independence. Based on the relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States, look where we're at, $72 billion in debt. The electric grid is antiquated and needs to be replaced. COVID was also a crisis. So at the end of the day, because we are U.S. citizens, you have to ask the question, how do you judge a country? By how it treats its citizens. Well, look at the treatment of the people of Puerto Rico and what they've been suffering. And there's your answer. We can no longer stay under this regime where we continue to be property of the United States and allow them to dictate policy on the island.
And as we mentioned, Walter, earlier, U.S. Senator Bob Menendez, alongside U.S. Representatives Nidia Velázquez and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, recently introduced the Puerto Rico Self-Determination Act of 2021. What exactly does this act propose, and do you believe that it's a step forward for the island?
To be quite honest, no. The the two bills, there's two separate bills. One is basically to become a state. The next bill is an option to become a state or to become a free nation. Now, because in that second bill, it asks to become a state as well. Basically, what happens is if we were to go with that bill that has the opportunity to become a state or to become free, we're still under that same regime. It is not a bill. Let's say it's not straightforward. It's not okay. Bill A says become a state. Bill B says become a free nation. It's not very clear like that. It's basically spinning our wheels, basically doing the same thing. For me, I do not support that bill. I believe if Miss Velasquez and Miss Ocasio believe in independence for Puerto Rico or self-determination, they do not show up at the United Nations decolonization hearings, which was just this June 18th. They're not there. I was there. I spoke. I spoke on behalf of the people of Puerto Rico and what we believe is best for the island. They were a no-show. No Velasquez, no Ocasio, which leads me to question what their motives are. If they believe in this self-determination, if they believe that the people of Puerto Rico should have a choice, then they should be present at the United Nations when these hearings are live.
Now, OCHO has a film titled Colonization is Extinction. Can you tell us more about this film and, what people can expect to find out with this film?
Yes, the film, I directed this film, I wrote it, and my wife helped produce it several years ago, right under the Obama administration, just before he passed the PROMESA Act. Now, the film Colonization is Extinction is about Puerto Rico and the economic crisis, and it breaks down the history between PR and the United States, right from the time of Columbus, right up to, like I said, when Obama signs the PROMESA Act, and gives you everything in between. So it tells you what has happened between Puerto Rico and the United States, which many people are unaware of. They didn't know that it used to be illegal to fly the Puerto Rican flag in Puerto Rico. They didn't know that they sterilized over 30% of the women in Puerto Rico. They didn't know about the Jones Act. They didn't know that if you spoke Spanish in school or if you taught Spanish in school, you could be fired. So there were many different things that are going on in the island. They're unaware about the bombings of Vieques from 1945 into the 2000s. And that island today still has the highest cancer rate in all of Puerto Rico. And they're still fumbling around with the cleanup to this very day. So it breaks down all this history and it puts it all together. And it shows you what the current history is and the relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States and why we believe independence is the best thing for the island.
Now, Walter, why do you think there's such a divide in education between Puerto Ricans living in the diaspora versus what happens on the island? Do you have an idea why that happens?
Well, I was out there in Puerto Rico right after the hurricane because I was a lineman by trade. I was out there for almost 3 months living out there. And when I spoke to the community, I was talking to them about the history between the island and Puerto Rico. And it's not really taught in schools. It's really not talked about in the Puerto Rican, in the schools in Puerto Rico. And at the same time, we also have this Stockholm syndrome. We believe that we cannot operate without the United States. We went from one slave master to another. First, we were under the rule of Spain for several hundreds of years. Then when 1898 rolled around, the United States stepped in, and we went from one property owner to another property owner. So we've been in this state where we just been owned, and everybody has been dictating our future to us for the last 500 years. So the idea that we could be free and self-sustain and self-manage just becomes unthinkable. And it's a very terrifying thing for people to try to grasp.
Got it. So there are plans to commemorate the victims of Hurricane Maria with a memorial and community meeting space here in New York City. Can you share more about this monument?
Yes. I'm part of the Taino Towers board, which is a community in Spanish Harlem. And it consists of 4 towers, and it has a senior center and charter schools. And we have decided to put together, a monument to honor the 4,645 that perished in Puerto Rico because of the hurricane. So this is basically what it would look like. This is the image of the monument. This will stand 13 feet tall, about 5 feet wide, and this will be at the senior center at Taino Towers. It will be outdoors. So what we will be able to do is every year we can get together, congregate at the site, light a candle, we say a prayer, have a few words, and then celebrate some bomba, some plena, some live food, music. And we can do this every year to honor our victims so that we can make sure that no one forgets what has happened in Puerto Rico and the all the deaths that have occurred. So this is something that we could possibly do every year and continue to do so from this point on.
I love it, and I think it's a beautiful, stunning monument, and I hope that people come by once it's erected in Taino Towers. So without further ado, Walter, how can people find out more about OCHO, your organization, also watch the film and support these efforts at this time? I know there's also an effort to support the monument as well, no?
Yes. So if anybody wants to know more about myself or what it is that I do, you just go to www.theocho.net. If you want to reach out directly, you have my email, theocho.net@gmail.com. There you can actually purchase the mini monument, which basically we're using these to help raise funds to pay for the monument, which we plan to erect on the 4-year anniversary of September this year. Si Dios quiere, if everything works out, we'll have this monument erected at Taino Towers for the 4-year anniversary. And people can come down. We want people to come down, and we want people to get in to get involved. Also, you can purchase the film on the same website, the same email. You reach out to me. I sell the film for $15. So, and it's a 45-minute film. It's an easy feed. It's an easy watch. It breaks down everything to you pretty quick. And we're also available to do private screenings and Q&A as well, so I can answer and take questions from the community to let people know what is happening.
Perfecto. Muchas gracias, Walter. Thank you for joining us today and talking about this important topic and Puerto Rico as well.
Thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
Of course. Likewise. We'll be right back here on Open BXRX Tuesday.